So in this video, I'm going to talk a little bit more about Meaghan Vass and her role in the fight to gain exoneration for Sue Neill Fraser. Before I do though, I wanted to make a request of my viewers. I noticed on my last lot of analytics that there's still a high percentage of people who view my content that aren't subscribers. If you're not a subscriber, you can help my channel out by simply pressing the subscribe button. It doesn't cost you anything, but it helps get my content out there into the YouTube algorithm and helps get my content seen. I'm super grateful for every person who does subscribe to my channel, and that's all I ask in terms of support. On an aside, I will mention thank you to those of you who have been buying me coffees. There's a link in the description for my videos, which is a buy me a coffee link. And thank you to those people who have joined my channel as members. There'll be more member content coming out very soon. And there is a link in my channel description for membership. Also, if you feel you'd like to show your support, there is a super thanks button connected to this video. These are things that go above and beyond. At the end of the day, I'm more than happy just if you can click subscribe. So let's get back to Sue Neill Fraser. So from the very start, Sue Neill Fraser's case has been punctuated by a string of disappointments, and many of those are connected to Meaghan Vass. So for those of you who've missed my previous Sue Neill Fraser videos, there is a playlist which you can go to update yourself in terms of information, but I'll just give you a quick rundown. Meaghan Vass was a 15-year-old homeless teen at the time that Sue's partner Bob Chappell went missing. We've found out since that, by her own account, Ms. Vass was on board the yacht the Four Winds on the night that Bob Chappell went missing. And by her own account, she was with two males, one of whom was responsible for Bob's death. You'd think that would make it a slam dunk, right? That would be enough to go and have Sue's conviction overturned. But it seems like this has been a dead end from the get-go with Meaghan Vass. So I wanted to explore a little bit of why that is the case. First of all, if we go right back to when the trial was occurring, so way back before Sue was even convicted, Tas police only discovered that the massive sample of DNA that had been found on the yacht belonged to Ms. Vass around the time of the trial. Ms. Vass had been arrested on a charge of shoplifting, I think it was. And as protocol, a DNA sample was taken, which came up as matching the huge DNA sample that had been taken from the yacht. At the time of Sue's trial, Sue's defence counsel had been given very little information about Ms. Vass. So they were unprepared, and they didn't do an adequate cross-examination. And when asked in court if she was present on the yacht the night that Bob Chappell disappeared, Meaghan Vass denied it. This was the end of it in terms of Sue's trial. it's a shame, because had Sue's defence team had time to really thoroughly examine what was in Miss Vass's file, Sue may have never received a conviction. So, fast forward a few years, and you have the team of Eve Ash and Colin McLaren, who were working on Sue's case. Eve Ash was working on creating a mini-series and contacted Colin McLaren, who was a retired detective from Victoria, for his assistance. During their time investigating, they were approached by a woman who they refer to in the Undercurrent series as Gabby, who put them in contact with Meaghan Vass. And after a lot of difficulty with getting Miss Vass to come and speak to them, they were able to obtain a signed statutory declaration by Miss Vass, saying that she was on board the yacht the night that Bob went missing with individuals who she at that point in time would not name, and that those individuals were responsible for Bob's death. So, for the people who were fighting for justice for Sue, fighting for her exoneration, it seemed like a slam dunk at the time. There was a witness who had signed a stat dec saying she was there the night that Bob went missing, that Sue was not there the night that Bob went missing, and that two individuals that she was with were responsible for what happened to Bob. This was fresh and compelling evidence, something which could be taken to an appeal and which people expected would have led to Sue's exoneration. It didn't happen that way, though. Ms. Vass backed down and claimed in court that she'd been pressured to make that statement. At the same time, 3 people were charged with perverting the course of justice. Those 3 people had been involved in having Ms. Vass make her statement, her stat dec, that should have allowed Sue to walk free. Did those people pervert the course of justice? No. Did Miss Vass flip because she'd been pressured into making an untruthful statement? I don't believe that's the case. So why did she back down? And why was it when, after going to Australia's 60 Minutes a number of years later, and once again making a public statement saying that she was there and that she knows who was responsible for Bob's death, why did she then get there in court and back down again? As a witness, she's no longer useful. Twice now, she's retracted her statement. A statement which should have exonerated Sue. It's easy enough to turn around and say that she's just a horrible person and that she's selfish, she's narcissistic. But perhaps there's a little bit more going on than what can be seen on the surface. So, at the time that Bob went missing, Miss Vass was a 15-year-old homeless girl hanging around with petty criminals. petty criminals who were known to be violent. So, in terms of the trial, when she turned around and said she wasn't on the boat, she'd never been anywhere near the boat, you would expect nothing else from a teenage girl. It would have been so scary to be asked to say that you were on a boat, when that would mean you would be dumping your boyfriend or ex-boyfriend in it, and you know that he is a particularly violent, nasty individual. Perhaps a more competent defence team could have taken the time to have a look at Ms. Vass's file and could have set things in place that would have arranged for protection for Ms. Vass. But none of that happened. So in terms of the trial, Ms. Vass was no use. She was too scared of her boyfriend or ex-boyfriend to admit to being on the yacht. And of course, as a teenage girl, she was probably also afraid of getting in trouble herself. Don't forget, she was still breaking the law. She was there on board that yacht. She was probably afraid that she was going to go to prison. So let's skip forward to when she signed the stat dec for Sue's team, when she ended up letting them down horribly in court and saying that she was pressured into making that stat dec. What makes a person do something like that? Come forward and say that they want to do the right thing by someone, they want to tell the truth, they want to get someone exonerated, and they want to say what truly happened, and then they backpedal and it all goes out the window. What happened behind the scenes? There were a few things going on behind the scenes. So if you've watched the series Undercurrent and you saw the episode where they finally got Meaghan Vass to sign a stat dec about her involvement with Bob Chappell's disappearance, you will have seen how difficult it was for them even to get her in a room. Her reactions were certainly that of someone who had experienced extreme trauma. This woman came across to me as someone who truly was terrified. She wanted to do the right thing, but she was scared. Why was she so scared? Let's talk about something that happened 12 months before she signed that stat dec. So Lutana is a suburb in Hobart. And what happened in Lutana in April of 2016 was that a man known for drug abuse, known for violence, was stabbed to death by another man who was also known for being quite a violent individual, who also tended to use the sort of drugs that he shouldn't be using. So how does this connect with Ms. Vass and her reluctance to testify, her reluctance to go in and speak to the team who were making the documentary? It's this. The man who died used to be Ms. Vass's boyfriend. Not the boyfriend that she was with when Bob Chappell went missing, but a more recent boyfriend. They'd been together for some time, and they weren't together anymore. He'd moved on and he was with another lady, but they had that past. Now, why would this make Ms. Vass worry about coming forward for Sue Neill Fraser? Simply because it was suggested that Justin, the man who was stabbed to death, had in fact been lured to the house that night or that early morning with the intention of violence against him. Ms. Vass knew that the people connected with her ex-boyfriend were violent people. Her ex-boyfriend, or her second ex-boyfriend, Justin, had been stabbed to death, and the rumours were that he had been lured to the location so they could attack him. And there were some rumours that it had connections with Ms. Vass and her knowledge of the Sue Neill Fraser case. According to the documentary, Ms. Vass had a journal and had written several journal entries in relation to what happened to Bob Chappell. Is it possible that her ex-boyfriend Justin knew something about those journal entries, or even had possession of those journals, and that's why he was targeted? From what I know, the journals were never recovered, never handed over, never brought forward as evidence. So the possibility that Justin was targeted because of what he knew or what he had is not within the realms of impossibility. Certainly something that would make Ms. Vass fearful, knowing that people around her original ex-boyfriend were violent people who would cause people injury. Okay, but that is obviously speculation. There's nothing there that you can directly link back to Sue's case. Simply connections between people. And if you have a look at what Tasmania is like, everybody is connected to everybody somehow there. So what about what was going on around the time when Meaghan Vass finally signed that stacked deck? What was happening around that time that made her decide that she was going to say that she was pressured to sign that stacked deck and to back out in court? So it was in April of 2017 that Ms. Vass finally signed that stacked deck. Now, like I said, Hobart's a small place and people know each other. I've no doubt that her former boyfriend, Samuel Devine, knew back in March that she was in negotiations with the team who were creating the documentary for her to go on record about what happened to Bob Chappell. I've no doubt also that Meaghan Vass would have been very, very much aware of Samuel Devine at the time when she was sticking her neck out on Sue's behalf. So what is playing in the background now is Sam Devine's social media. Know the dates. This is all stuff that he was putting up around the time when Meaghan Vass was in negotiations with Eve Ash and Colin McLaren to tell her side of the story. This is a guy who is known to be very violent. This is a guy who's known to have connections with plenty of people in Hobart's criminal world. And to me, it seems like the whole time that Ms. Vass was in negotiations, when she was trying to do the right thing and she wanted to do the right thing, he was using his social media to try and scare her off and try and let her know without making it direct and naming her or sending anything to her directly, that he knew what she was doing and that she was going to be in trouble if she acted in the way that she intended to do. Don't forget, this is an individual who, as far as we know, allegedly was responsible for the death of Bob Chappell. He knows that she was a witness. She knows what he is capable of. If I was in her position, I would have been pretty scared as well. So, no wonder, after signing a stat dec, she was quite happy to turn around and claim that she was pressured into doing so. Let's not forget that in signing the stat dec, she was admitting herself to criminal actions. So it wouldn't have been hard for Tas police to shut it down and try and prevent her from following through in court by scaring her with the thought of going to jail. There was never any protection for this woman at any point in time. She was asked to step up and tell the truth to Sue. And defence teams tried to do the right thing by her. But prosecution didn't give a damn because they didn't want her testimony. They wanted to shut her down. So, of course, when she went to court that final time in 2021, I think it was, no wonder she was scared after the Mercury, Tasmania's mockery of a newspaper, decided to make it a front page headline naming the individuals who she had named in court as being responsible for Bob's death. Of course, she ended up being an unreliable witness because she was too intimidated to continue to do the right thing. This woman was probably scared for her life. She was probably also scared that she would be thrown in jail because she was never offered any immunity for her statements. Nobody did the right thing by this woman. The police certainly didn't do the right thing by this woman. The prosecution didn't do the right thing by this woman. And I think the defence team possibly were a little bit naive to believe that people wouldn't target this woman and that they needed to try and put things in place before asking her to stand as a witness. I can't begin to fathom the amount of trauma that this woman has gone through. But I can say one thing for sure. This is a definite case of witness intimidation. no matter how you look at it, the outcome was always going to be the same. She was always going to be too scared to follow through with her statements because the stakes were too high.